All right, for the plaintiff, Mr. Thomas. For the defense, Mr. Fontana. 200 words a minute, and beginning with some colloquy, and then eventually going into plaintiff questioning. Here we go.
Ready? Begin. Counsel, do you plan on filing tax returns?
I offered them to counsel and she wouldn't.
No, that wasn't my question. Is Mr. Bell going to file his tax returns today?
Yes.
All right. When were they prepared?
About midnight last night.
All right. And when do you plan on filing them?
Your Honor, I have no authority.
No.
The IRS agents are here. I am prepared to hand them to them.
The IRS agents don't take tax returns, as far as I know. The IRS does.
Well, I am prepared to take them wherever they want them to go. I brought them with me because I was afraid if I put them in the mail.
Let me ask you this. Is there anybody here from the IRS who is prepared to review these tax returns and make a determination for me today whether or not they comply with the filing of a proper tax return?
Yes, Your Honor.
Now there is somebody back there. You better give them to him quick.
Thank you, Your Honor. For the record, Your Honor, I am handing him tax returns for the tax years of 1983 through and including the 1992.
I would like to know who you are giving the return to.
His name is Larry Owen, O-W-E-N.
Let's do this. Let's proceed with the other portions of the hearing. At least maybe Mr. Owen can have at least some answer for us when we are done with the other portions. All right. Is it your position, if these tax returns are proper returns, that you do not wish to pursue that part of the claimed violation?
No, Your Honor, not really. Our position is that the mere filing of the tax returns is not sufficient to meet with that condition, that the condition is to help with filing and paying. And to our knowledge, no attempt has been made to pay those taxes in any way, shape, or form. And therefore, although the returns in fact are filed, this does not meet with the condition.
All right. Well, let's proceed with the first violation number, which is a violation of condition number 2.
I would like to call Officer Wilson.
Sir, will you take the witness stand right over here and state your full name for the record, please?
James S. Wilson, W-I-L-S-O-N.
Mr. Wilson, how are you employed?
I am a federal probation officer, Eastern District of California.
And what is the nature of your dealings with Mr. Paul Bell?
Well, I was Mr. Bell's probation officer for several months in 2000.
And during that particular time frame, did you become aware of a condition of probation that regarded dealings with persons that were doing illegal acts?
That's one of the conditions, is to deal only with lawful persons.
And did you have discussions, did you have occasion to discuss this particular condition with Mr. Bell?
Yes, I did.
How did that occur?
On April 8, 2005, I was personally told by the state board, the state franchise board, that Mr. Bell was going to be in that office that morning, and there was going to be newspaper reporters, and they thought there might be some problems, and they requested that the probation officer be there. And at that time, I proceeded to the state franchise board, and Mr. Bell entered. He came into the office.
Objection, Your Honor. This is a narrative, and also I object to the portion of his answer which is hearsay.
Well, at a probation hearing, you can have hearsay material. It is somewhat narrative. I'm afraid this is leading us nowhere.
Did you then go to the courthouse?
Yes, I did.
And where was this located?
Well, it's about 2 blocks from the probation office, and it's about a couple of blocks from the Superior Courthouse in Los Angeles, California.
Did you have occasion to see Mr. Bell there?
Yes, I did.
And who else was present?
A man named Jack Vaughn and Pat McCarty.
Your Honor, I would like to offer into evidence what's been marked as Exhibit Number 1. It's a legal document entitled Los Angeles Superior Court, County of Los Angeles, State of California. And this is a certified copy of a complaint against Jack Vaughn.
Objection, Your Honor. This is irrelevant. This is not a final conviction.
Well, the court will accept it at the present time, and it should be tied up. In and of itself, it would be irrelevant.
Can you tell me what the document is?
This is an indictment with 4 counts of tax evasion against Mr. Jack Vaughn.
Reset on 32. And what were the proceedings at the courthouse that Mr. Bell was present at?
Well, Mr. Bell was suing the state franchise board because they took a vehicle from him, and a complaint was being filed or being served to the state franchise board and one of their employees by Mr. Vaughn on behalf of Paul Bell.
Do you know the circumstances of that criminal action against Mr. Vaughn?
Well, yes, Mr. Vaughn had been the subject of this complaint because he did not file state income tax returns. These are revenue and tax code violations. It's tax evasion.
Do you know whether or not Mr. Vaughn was convicted on that?
Well, as far as I know, he has not been convicted. He has just recently been arrested and charged.
Was Mr. Bell aware that he had been arrested and charged?
Yes, he was.
Objection calls for speculation. Motion to strike.
Well, you might ask the witness how he knows.
How do you know that Mr. Bell was aware of that?
I was told by Mr. Fraley, who was a state franchise board employee, that Mr. Vaughn had been arrested and charged recently. I asked Mr. Vaughn if that were true, and he said yes. I informed Mr. Bell that under these circumstances, he should not be dealing with Mr. Vaughn.
After being informed by that, he should not be dealing with Mr. Vaughn. Did he continue to deal with Mr. Vaughn?
Yes, he did.
And when did that occur?
Also on April 8th, they proceeded to the Superior Court, Los Angeles Superior Court, to file more papers, and they kept on with their relationship.
And had you put Mr. Bell on notice as his probation officer that he should not be dealing with Mr. Vaughn?
Yes, I did.
Had you also put Mr. Bell on notice that he should not be dealing with Mr. Pat McCarty?
Yes, I did.
When did you first have occasion to know that Mr. Bell was dealing with Mr. McCarty?
Well, I was introduced to Mr. McCarty, and then I was informed by Mr. Fraley that Mr. McCarty had been convicted of tax evasion. I asked Mr. McCarty about that, and he said that that was true. I told Mr. Bell again that under these conditions, he was on notice. He should not be dealing with Mr. McCarty at all.
Your Honor, at this point, I would like to introduce what's been marked as Exhibit Number 2, which is the complaint against Mr. McCarty.
All right, it will be marked as plaintiff number 2.
Same objection, Your Honor.
The objection is overruled.
Did you inform Mr. Bell as his probation officer that he should not be dealing with Mr. McCarty?
Yes, I did.
Did Mr. Bell continue to deal with him?
He did.
Your Honor, I have no further questions of this witness.
Do you have any questions, counsel?
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Wilson, when you saw Mr. Bell with Mr. Vaughn, was Mr. Vaughn abiding with the law or not abiding with the law?
I don't understand.
Was he doing anything illegal at the time you saw him?
No.
When you saw Mr. Bell with Mr. McCarty, was Mr. McCarty breaking the law at that time?
No.
Is it your position or understanding that you told Mr. Bell that he is not to deal with anyone who is breaking the law?
Well, breaking the law or hanging around with someone who has a criminal conviction.
My question to you is, did you advise him that it would be a violation of probation if he dealt with anyone who broke the law, who was breaking the law?
In so many words, I did tell him that probably.
The violation of probation that you are telling us that he was hanging around with people who were not law-abiding citizens. Is that correct?
Right.
What was it that these two people were doing that tells you that they were not law-abiding citizens?
Well, one of them was convicted of a tax crime. The other one was under investigation and had pending charges for a tax crime.
Do you know whether or not Mr. Bell has any conditions of probation that he is not to deal with anyone who has broken the law in the past?
That would not be considered a law-abiding person if they have broken the law in the past.
Does he have a written condition that reads just that way, that he is not to deal with anyone who has ever been convicted of anything in the past?
No, it's not written out that way.
It is your opinion that anyone who has been convicted of jaywalking would be a person Mr. Bell should not deal with?
No, of course not.
What are those boundaries that appear on his written conditions of probation?
That he is not to deal with anyone other than a law-abiding person.
Would that be someone who has a speeding ticket in the past?
No.
How would Mr. Bell know what your definition of a law-abiding citizen is?
Well, I explained the conditions of probation before with him, and, we have to, each case would be considered individually.
Did you investigate to find out whether or not Mr. Vaughn is in fact a member of the grand jury of Los Angeles?
Well, it is my understanding he was not a member, that he had been dismissed a few days before this incident on April 8th.
Is it your opinion he is no longer on the panel for the grand jury?
I believe he is not. He may have resigned. I don't know. He may have resigned or was dismissed.
Isn't it true that the reason, strike that, why were you at the courthouse on the day in question?
You mean the courthouse or the state franchise board?
The state franchise board.
I was there because the state franchise board requested that I be there.
Isn't it true that you filed this probation violation against Mr. Bell because he was filing a civil suit against the franchise tax board?
No, that's not true.
Isn't it true that you wanted to silence his civil suit and that's why you filed this probation action?
No.
Did you know whether or not the conviction for Mr. Vaughn, strike that. Do you know whether or not there's been a conviction of Mr. Vaughn for anything?
No, sir, I don't believe he's been convicted yet.
Of anything?
I don't believe so.
How about in the past? Has he had any convictions of any criminal statute?
I don't think so.
Do you know whether or not, in fact, Mr. Vaughn was in the process of acting as a process server on the date that you saw him with Mr. Bell?
He did serve the papers in this case, yes.
Isn't that true that that's why they told you he was, what they told you he was doing?
No.
With respect to Mr. McCarty, do you know whether or not he has a final judgment or whether or not there's an appeal pending in his case?
I believe he had an appeal pending. He had been convicted, but he had an appeal pending.
Were you informed if the appeal has been upheld or not?
I don't know.
Do you know if he has any other criminal convictions in the past?
I don't know.
Nothing further.
Anything further?
No, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Wilson, you may step down. Thank you, sir.
Your Honor, the IRS agent has had an opportunity to review these returns. I have had an opportunity to review them, and Your Honor, these are not acceptable returns.
All right, then I suggest you give them back to counsel and we will proceed.
I would like to call Mr. Larry Owen, O-W-E-N, from the IRS.
Take the witness stand and state your full name for the record, please.
Larry Owen, O-W-E-N.
Mr. Owen, how are you employed?
I am employed as an agent for the IRS.
Mr. Owen, how did you become involved in the tax affairs of Mr. Paul Bell?
Mr. Wilson brought Mr. Bell down to my manager's office in Los Angeles, and my manager assigned me to the case.
And what were your instructions as regarding your dealings with Mr. Bell?
My instructions were to receive any tax returns that Mr. Bell had prepared.
Until today, had Mr. Bell given you any tax returns?
None, no tax returns until today.
Did you review just immediately prior certain documents?
Excuse me?
Did you believe or review certain documents that were supposed to be tax returns?
Yes.
In your opinion, are they tax returns?
In my opinion, they would not be tax returns.
No further questions of this witness, Your Honor.
Counsel, do you have any questions?
Your Honor, I have some exhibits I would like marked if I may.
All right.
Mr. Owen, were you in court May 15, 1995 in this court, the afternoon session?
Yes.
And after that court hearing, did you have a meeting with me in the U.S. Attorney's Office?
Yes.
Who else was present?
I believe Mr. Murray was present and Curtis Nash, the U.S. Attorney.
Who is Mr. Murray?
Mr. Murray is a special agent with the IRS.
Was he involved in the criminal investigations in Mr. Bell's earlier case?
I believe he was.
And at that meeting, did I request of you that your office provide me with any information you had concerning Mr. Bell's tax returns for the years 1983 through 1992?
Yes.
And did you say you would provide me with all the information you had so I could submit it to a tax person to do the returns for him?
Yes.
In that regard, did I send a letter addressed directly to you dated May 19, 1995, confirming that meeting that we had?
I believe so.
And did a copy go to Mr. Murray?
Without the letter, I don't know. I don't recall what was on the bottom of the letter.
Did Mr. Murray tell you he got a letter?
We really had no conversations saying that.
How about Mr. Nash? Have you ever talked to him since the last court hearing?
I spoke to him once.
Did he say he got such a letter?
I believe he did mention that he received that letter.
Did the letter truly reflect our meeting of the day I have just asked you about?
Could I see a copy of that letter just to refresh my memory?
For the record, I would like to hand this witness exhibit B, Your Honor.
All right.
Have you had a chance to review that exhibit?
Yes, I have.
Did it truly state the meeting that we had?
Yes.
On that, or during that meeting, did you also advise me that the years in question that you wanted returns filed were once again the years 1983 through 1992?
Yes.
Did you indicate you would also send me Xerox copies of the tax forms that needed to be filed for those years?
No, that was not part of our conversation.
Did you later send any information to me?
Yes, I did.
When?
Without my file, I don't know the exact date that I did send that to you.
Your Honor, I really don't see the relevancy of this line of questioning.
Well, let's assume that he told Mr. Bell what he had to do, comply with the terms of his probation, and Mr. Bell did it. I don't know. I don't see any relevancy either.
That's the relevancy, Your Honor.
I don't know the exact date without looking at my file. The information was mailed to you, though.
What did you mail me?
I mailed you the information that we had for his income for 1983 through 1992 inclusive.
Did you send me anything else?
I sent you what we had previously discussed, which is all the income that we had for Mr. Bell for those particular years.
Did you provide Mr. Bell with any tax returns, blank tax returns?
Yes, I did.
When?
Again, without my file, I'm not quite sure of the date. It was last week, last Wednesday, perhaps.
Did he go to your office to pick those up?
Yes, he did.
What did you give him?
I gave him the tax returns for 1983 through 1992, along with the proper schedules.
Did you give him the 1983 returns?
No, I gave him the 1994 returns.
Did you tell him he should modify those returns for the earlier years?
That is correct.
What other types of schedules did you give him?
The tax rate schedules for those particular years, just what he asked for.
What else?
That's all he asked for, and that's all he was provided.
Did you give him a Schedule C?
Yes, I gave him that.
Were there any other forms that you wanted him to file with his returns?
No, those were the forms that he asked for, and those were the ones that were provided to him along with the tax tables.
Which forms are you saying he should have filed or he should file?
He should have filed a 1040 form for those particular years, those years of 1983 to 1992.
What about a Schedule C?
If he was in business for himself and he had to file a Schedule C, then he should have filed a Schedule C. Basically, we gave him the same package we would mail any taxpayer.
Did you give him any Schedule SE?
I believe I did.
Do you know for what years?
They should have been probably for all the years.
Do you recall if you did give him schedules?
I believe that I did.
Let me finish my question. Once again, do you recall whether or not you gave him Schedule SE for the tax years 1983 through 1992?
I believe I did.
I would like to show you what's been marked Defendant's Exhibit P and ask you to identify that for the record.
This is the list of income from response to some type of a letter. Response is some letters. This is part of the information that we sent to you.
Does that exhibit have several pages?
It has 3 pages.
Is that the information you sent me?
Yes, it's a copy of the information.
Did you send me anything else?
I sent you just what you asked for, which is the income that we had claimed for the years of 1983 through 1992.
Do you see that information contained anywhere on the returns you earlier viewed?
Not quite the same. It's somewhat different.
Do you recall receiving a letter to me dated May 29, 1995?
Could I have a copy of it to see?
I will show it to you in a minute. Do you recall whether or not I sent you a letter in which I advised you that I had received those 3 pages but had not received any tax information for the year 1988?
No, I don't recall any letter from you. We sent all the information we had for the years 1983 through 1992.